Hey there, welcome to this channel. You may know me from my videos about the ancient Mediterranean, but these days we're exploring all sorts of ancient mysteries, from secret mummies to the strange science of ancient Rome, because now you're not in your living room anymore. You blink and you're lying on warm sun-baked stone. Your nose fills with the smell of dust and distant smoke. Somewhere, water drips into a cistern. You in the middle of an ancient city, stone walls rising around you like the ribs of a sleeping giant. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. First tragedy of the ancient world. You are hoping for some alone time. Tall, pale-skinned men with red beards stare at you from under their hats. One holds a spear tipped with obsidian. Another clutches a feathered shield. They don't look hostile, just confused. The men speak in a language that sounds like pebbles grinding together and ask if you have any tic-tacs. When you shake your head, they shrug, murmur amongst themselves, and vanish into the crowd, balancing baskets on their heads. Merchants hawk their wares in a language that sounds like wind chimes. A priestess walks by carrying an offering of figs. A man stumbles out of an alley holding a broken jar and sighs dramatically. Welcome to the great mystery of civilizations that built everything we take for granted: cities, writing, plumbing, the concept of brunch, and then vanished. Did they just run off to join a cult in the woods? Did they upload their consciousnesses to flash drives and hide them somewhere? Or did something more sinister befall them? These are the greatest lost civilizations you've never heard of. Imagine a place that is cleaner than modern New York, and more advanced than most cities today. Yet it's unknown outside South Asia and even within South Asia. We're talking about one of the most complex urban planning projects ever conceived. This was a civilization located on the western side of the Indian subcontinent, between roughly 2800 and 1800 BCE, like Egypt or Mesopotamia. The Indus cities had sophisticated towns and urban planning, including the world's first indoor plumbing. The best preserved Indus city is Mohenjo-daro, which means Mound of the Dead. British officials uncovered it accidentally in 1922 while surveying a railway line. Most of the city was destroyed over the centuries by flooding, but archaeologists found the remains of public baths, covered drains, the earliest known grid system, and grand public buildings. They also found evidence of organized religion and a sacred number, 29, which may have played a role in city planning and ritual sacrifice. It almost feels as if we're rereading a history book about this civilization, except we Kuanti because we Kuanti read their writing system. One of the most fascinating things about the Indus cities is that we have no idea what happened to them. Many historians believe that climate change caused catastrophic flooding that destroyed the civilization, though others think that an invading people called the Aryans wiped them out. However, we may never be able to prove either theory, since nobody has been able to decipher the Indus script. Some scholars say it isn't even a true script, but simply a collection of abstract symbols. The reason they had to invent a new way of writing is anyone's guess, unless you're one of the few people who understand Indus. No. 3. The Kingdom of Kush. Now we travel to Africa, to the Kingdom of Kush, which flourished in present-day Sudan between roughly 1070 BCE and 350 CE. During its peak in the 2nd century BCE, Kush controlled most of Egypt's former territory. Its capital city, Meroe, was located south of Egypt along the Nile River and was home to a thriving international trading center. Archaeologists have discovered ruins of over 20 pyramids there. The Kingdom of Kush was very wealthy, thanks to trade in gold, ivory, incense, wine, glass, textiles, and slaves. They were also pretty creative. They made amazing jewelry and crafted unique works of art showing strong Egyptian influences. Sadly, the Kingdom of Kush was destroyed by the Kingdom of Aksum, which conquered Kush in the 4th century CE. But there's a lot we still don't know about Kush. For instance, its early rulers were probably black, but later rulers seem to have been white. So was there a racial divide? How did the Kushite people go from building pyramids to being ruled by outsiders? Was the destruction of Kush part of a larger pattern of African civilizations being destroyed before they could reach their full potential? Unfortunately, these questions are impossible to answer without written records. While archaeologists found hundreds of inscribed stones in Meroe, none of them tell us anything about the kingdom's history, but you can learn about it through a program. Number 2. The Kingdom of Nu. If you thought the Indus cities were baffling, check out the Kingdom of Nu, which flourished in China between 1800 BCE and 220 BCE. Little is known about this civilization today, though its legacy lives on in Chinese culture and folklore. For example, the legend of the Great Yu the Great is believed to have originated during the Shang dynasty, which ruled during the latter half of the 2nd millennium BCE. Yu the Great supposedly saved China from devastating floods and established the nation's first centralized government. In reality, he may have been the leader of a tribal confederation or a chieftain of a small village, but as the Chinese historian Liu Jie wrote in the 3rd century CE, the point of historical tales isn't to record facts, but to describe archetypes. So what archetypes did the people of Niu create? Well, in addition to Yu the Great, the Jiahu people left behind examples of early Chinese writing, some of the oldest in the world, dating back to as far as 1400 BCE. They created a sophisticated system of numbers and weights and measures, traded extensively with other early civilizations, and invented early forms of divination. They farmed wheat and millet, herded cattle and pigs, and used fishing boats on the nearby river. Does any of this sound familiar? That's because the Jiahu people basically created the foundation of Chinese culture and society, but then abruptly ended their civilization sometime around 220 BCE. For our final stop, we travel to South America. Nobody knows the jungle quite like the people who've lived in it for thousands of years, and nowhere is that wisdom more evident than in the mysterious city of gold. This pre-Columbian city is located deep in the Colombian jungle, hidden among swamps, limestone caves, and the ruins of several smaller settlements. It was once home to an estimated 10,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the Americas. But when Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they found it abandoned. Since the city was so overgrown, they only noticed the gold ornaments on the statues and named the settlement Los Bolas, or the Golden Balls. Later, the site was renamed to Ciudad de Oro, or the City of Gold. Unlike many other Latin American civilizations, the Terrana people left behind little in the way of written records. What we know about them comes from oral histories, archaeological evidence, and the legends of the Muisca people. According to local lore, the Muisca people fled to the mountains after a cataclysmic flood destroyed their settlements along the Magdalena River. Perhaps this is why so many of their cities were built on top of mountains or artificial platforms. To get to the top, the Terrana built long staircases and covered them in huge boulders. In fact, some scientists think the Terrana were responsible for moving millions of tons of rocks to build the foundations of their cities. But by 1536, when the Spanish invaded, the Terrana were gone. Some historians say they were wiped out by disease brought from Europe. Others say they fled into the mountains. Still, others say the Terrana were simply a myth, but we may never know for sure. What do you think happened to these civilizations? Do you think they disappeared because of natural disasters, war, disease, or did they vanish intentionally, leaving their old lives behind to start anew? Are you exhausted by modern life? Does the hum of technology leave you yearning for simpler times? Well, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and imagine stepping back in time to a bustling marketplace. Feel the sun on your skin, the crowd at your shoulder, the scent of spices in the air. Today we're not just talking about history, we're diving right into the heart of it. We're bringing ancient cities to life, exploring their bustling marketplaces, and uncovering the secrets of daily life in biblical times. Whether you're an avid history buff or just someone looking to add a little adventure to their day, this is the journey for you. So stay tuned because we have a lot to cover today. Let's embark on this thrilling expedition together. Hey, you're here now, so let's explore. Careful where you step. There's a suspiciously large beetle eyeing your sandals. You wander through a cracked stone archway and boom, markets. Imagine the clatter of clay pots, the smell of roasting meat mixed with, well, let's call it ancient city-era fragrance of sweat, smoke, and livestock that hasn't discovered deodorant yet. You pass scribes etching on tablets, a farmer argues with a tax collector, someone's yelling about a goat, and you realize, life here feels alarmingly familiar. Swap the tunics for t-shirts and those clay jars for Amazon packages. And honestly, same chaos, new fonts. The year is 2000 BCE. You, a humble traveler, find yourself in the vibrant, chaotic heart of Uruk, one of the world's first great cities. The air buzzes with activity. Merchants hawk their wares, farmers unload their produce, and artisans display their crafts. It's a sensory feast. In the distance, the great ziggurat of Uruk stands as a testament to the power of the city's priests. But today, your attention is captured by the bustling market square. Clay tablets are the ancient world's answer to smartphones, serving as everything from shopping lists to banking records. Scribes, the original influencers, meticulously etch transactions onto them with a wedge-shaped stylus. No apps, no problem. Just pure unadulterated elbow grease and an impressive knowledge of cuneiform. These aren't your run-of-the-mill number crunchers. They're the OG data nerds, the ones keeping the ancient economy chugging along. But don't be fooled by their seemingly simple task. Reading, writing, and arithmetic were a big deal back then. It wasn't until centuries later that these subjects became, well, basic. In the shade of a nearby palm tree, a group of weary travelers seek respite from the relentless Mesopotamian sun. One traveler, his face weathered and lined like an ancient map, pulls out a clay tablet and begins to read aloud. The others lean in, their faces etched with anticipation. What could be so important that even the scorching heat couldn't deter them from their studies? Perhaps a message from distant lands, a love poem, or maybe even the latest gossip from the city. Whatever it is, it seems the written word holds a powerful sway over these ancient minds. Amidst the din of the market, you spot a group of men unloading sacks from a donkey. Grain spills onto the ground, creating a miniature mountain range for the children playing nearby. These men aren't just farmers. They're the backbone of the city, ensuring its survival one harvest at a time. Without them, Urk would be nothing but a dusty pile of bricks. These men, with their sun-kissed skin and calloused hands, are the ones who feed the city, quite literally. As you watch, a burly man with a thick beard steps forward. He's not just any farmer though, no sir. This is Ishtap, a man whose name echoes with importance throughout Urk. Why, you ask? Well, Ishtap isn't just a farmer. He's a visionary, an innovator, an OG entrepreneur. You see, Ishtap has a unique idea, an idea so revolutionary it'll change the way agriculture works in Mesopotamia forever. He's introducing irrigation. That's right, this guy isn't waiting for Mother Nature to decide how the crops will grow. He's taking matters into his own hands, or should I say his canals. His idea involves digging canals to water the fields, basically giving the plants a helping hand up, and guess what? It's working like a charm. His crops are flourishing, much to the envy of his neighbors. Ishtap isn't just feeding himself anymore. He's feeding entire communities. He's so successful that other farmers are ditching their hoes and heading straight to the nearest shovel. They want in on this whole irrigation thing. Who can blame them? It's not every day you witness agricultural ingenuity at its finest. But hold on a minute. Not everyone's thrilled about Ishtap's success. Enter Shamash, the head tax collector of Urk. This man is all about order, rules, and, most importantly, revenue. He has got a nose for sniffing out irregularities and a set of laws that would make even the most seasoned tax consultant break a sweat. For Shamash, everything has a price, and he expects everyone to pay up. But when he sets his sights on Ishtap, trouble brews. You see, Shamash wants Ishtap to pay taxes on his extra produce. Produce that, quite frankly, Ishtap didn't think about. Honestly, it's not easy being a trailblazer. Sometimes progress comes with a few bumps in the road. And boy, does Shamash throw a major wrench in Ishtap's plans. It's a clash of wills, tradition versus innovation, and you're smack in the middle of it. Who will come out on top? Only time will tell. You, intrepid explorer, are in the midst of a bustling marketplace, the heart and soul of ancient city life. The air buzzes with the energy of merchants hawking their wares, farmers unloading their goods, and gossiping housewives comparing the latest styles. But your attention is caught by something unusual. Amidst the sea of bartering and trading, you spot a lone woman standing confidently behind a pile of vibrant fabrics. She's not just any merchant. No, she's Enheduanna, the daughter of the powerful King Sargon of Akkad, and her business acumen is as sharp as the finest blade. Enheduanna isn't just selling textiles, she's selling dreams. Her fabrics, dyed in hues of lapis lazuli blue, cinnabar red and emerald green, are the epitome of luxury. They whisper tales of faraway lands and exotic adventures, enticing the most discerning customers. But Enheduanna isn't just a businesswoman. She's also a trailblazer. She's breaking gender norms and societal expectations by carving out a space for herself in the male-dominated world of trade. In a time when women were often confined to domestic roles, she was out here stacking coins and making deals. Talk about a game changer. As you approach her stall, Enheduanna looks up, her eyes sparkling with intelligence and ambition. She's not just selling fabrics, she's selling a lifestyle, and you can't help but feel drawn to her magnetic personality and business savvy. But wait, there's more. Enheduanna isn't just a shrewd businesswoman, she's also a devout worshipper of the moon goddess Nana. Her faith is a guiding light in her life, influencing her business practices and personal philosophy. For Enheduanna, religion isn't just a set of beliefs, it's a way of life. She sees divine favor in her business success and offers her profits to the temple, cementing her place in the community. It's a beautiful blend of commerce and devotion. As you continue your exploration of the market, you realize that each stall, each interaction, each piece of merchandise tells a story. The bustling marketplace isn't just a place of commerce. It's a microcosm of ancient city life, a melting pot of cultures, a stage for human drama, and a testament to the ingenuity of mankind. You've experienced the thrill of haggling over prices, the aroma of spices wafting through the air, the vibrant colors of handmade crafts, and the warmth of human interaction. But it's more than that. You've witnessed the lives of ordinary people, their hopes, their struggles, their triumphs, and their faith. You've seen the dawn of civilization, the birth of new ideas, and the courage it takes to challenge the status quo. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the marketplace, you know it's time to go. You leave with a heavy heart, knowing that you've just witnessed something truly special. A glimpse into a world that existed thousands of years ago, yet feels strangely familiar today. The memory of Urk, its people and its stories will stay with you, reminding you of the resilience of the human spirit, the beauty of ancient cultures, and the power of storytelling. But here's the thing about ancient cities. They hide their stories in plain sight. The carvings on temple walls aren't just decorations. They're basically history's Instagram feed, bragging about battles, kings, and the occasional "look how rich I am" moment. In Mesopotamia, scribes baked their receipts onto clay tablets. In Egypt, hieroglyphs were the world's fanciest TikTok-esque pictures that told the story of everything from gods to grocery lists. Comment below if you'd totally subscribe to a pharaoh's channel called Daily Pyramid Vlogs. In today's city of Amman, Jordan, archaeologists uncovered an entire neighborhood carved into a hillside. It's called Hezekiah's Hill, and it dates back to between 700 BCE and 400 CE. The steep climb up this hill would have been worth it for the views, but mostly it was a way for people to stay cool, because most of the homes are naturally air-conditioned. During the day, the hot desert sun beats down on the sandstone, which heats the air inside the houses, but at night, the heat radiates back out of the stone, keeping the interiors toasty. And that might sound like a bad thing until you realize that in this part of the world, winter nights can be pretty chilly. These cave dwellings may have even helped people conserve energy. If there had been windows, they would have let in the hot sun during the day, but since there weren't any, the only light came through open doors, so people could close off their homes at sunset, keeping the warmth inside while they snuggled around whatever was like a fireplace back then. And that's not the only time ancient people found a super smart way to beat the heat, because another city also built on a hillside, Petra in Jordan, had a similar system, except it was carved into the sheer side of a mountain. Known as the treasury, this elaborate structure is actually a tomb. It wasn't used for housing, but it still had those same nifty thermal properties. Today, it's one of the new 7 wonders of the world, which means that millions of tourists visit every year. That sounds great for the local economy, right? Well, yeah, until you realize that the crowds have worn many of the carvings down to nothing more than a shiny black surface. And there's only so much Petra's protection team can do to stop them. So let this be a lesson to all of us. If you ever visit a historical site, don't be that person who can't resist touching the ancient stuff. As much as we love our iPhones, they're just not as iconic as some of the relics left behind by past civilizations. But they are very iconic, and as tempting as it is to scratch your initials on a wall, just try to imagine what it would be like if somebody did that to your phone. Maybe cover it with your own hieroglyphics. We know the Egyptians loved a good comeback. Just make sure you peel the sticker off first. Now, we have a long way to go before we get to ancient Egypt, but let's keep going. Back in the day, Babylon was a big city, kind of like today's Amman or Petra. Its population peaked at around 200,000 people during the 6th century BCE, and since nobody invented air conditioning yet, it was hot. To escape the summer heat, wealthy Babylonians built pleasure boats and set sail on the nearby river Euphrates. Archaeologists recently discovered the remains of one such boat, along with several others, a chariot, and some random cow bones. Yeah, no idea why the cows were there either, but the discovery helps researchers understand what daily life was like in ancient times. For example, the boats were made from cedar wood, a type of wood that doesn't preserve well, so we didn't expect to find it. Even though we knew the Babylonians used cedar, we hadn't seen any physical evidence of it until now. And when scientists dated the wood, they were surprised to learn that the trees came from modern Lebanon, which was probably a day's journey away. At the time, there was a whole forest there, but after centuries of use, the trees had been chopped down. Now, today, you can't even find a single cedar in Lebanon. There are only a few scattered groves near Damascus, and most of those were planted after the ancient ones were cut down. And without the help of modern technology, regrowing a forest is a lot like getting a cat to do anything you want to specifically pay it for. But thanks to the discovery of these boats, researchers learned that the ancient people did take care of their forests, because they transported the logs downstream to avoid damaging them. Now, these days, we have Amazon delivery, so we don't have to worry about transporting giant pieces of wood ourselves. But the concept of bringing the store to you isn't new. In fact, it goes back thousands of years. In 1834, archaeologists unearthed the remains of a Roman villa in the town of Pompeii, Italy. They knew it had been destroyed when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, burying the city in ash and pumice. And after excavating more of the ruins, they realized the villa had once been a bustling shopping district. Everything was laid out just like a modern mall, except instead of Pac-Man, the entertainment of choice was a ball game kind of like table tennis. It turns out the Romans played table tennis against a wall using a little leather ball. Kind of makes you wonder if ancient Rome had its own version of ping-pong paddle. Anyone? Probably not. In ancient Rome, most games involved chariots or gladiators or throwing things at each other. But this particular game seems to have originated in Egypt, where it was called royal sport. Then it made its way north to Greece, where it got the Olympic treatment. Finally, it landed in Rome, where it became popular among the upper classes. But even though it was a pastime of the elite, the rules of royal sport varied depending on where you played, and we don't know exactly what those rules were. In Egypt, players apparently used their hands, but later it became a game for athletes who competed while riding horses or chariots. The fact that if you lived in any of the great civilizations we talk about here, chances are you would have been wiped out along with everyone else. But here's the kicker. For all their brilliance, every ancient civilization eventually fell. The bustling city you're walking through now, one day it'll be silent. We find it thousands of years later, and we ask the same questions archaeologists ask today. Who were they? What did they believe? And why did they leave behind so many weird statues with big eyes? Some cities fell to floods, some to fire, some to very bad political decisions, looking at you Rome, and some, we're still guessing, because ancient history is basically one giant cliffhanger and the writers never posted the finale. Here are 6 ancient civilizations we don't know how or why they died. The Kingdom of Punt. First up, let's set our sights on an ancient kingdom located in modern-day Somalia. We're talking about Punt. This place was like the Og civilization of East Africa, its legacy dating back over 2,000 years. Imagine yourself strolling through bustling marketplaces filled with exotic goods from across the ancient world. Incense, gold, ivory, exotic animals, all brought in by seafaring traders who braved the Indian Ocean to get here. It was a hub of activity. Punt wasn't just a trading post. It was a cultural melting pot and a center of learning. The people of Punt were known for their skill in navigation and their knowledge of the stars, which helped them establish a unique calendar system. They even had their own script, though it remains undeciphered, adding to the enigma surrounding this lost civilization. The kingdom's heyday lasted around 400 years, before it mysteriously disappeared from written records around the year 100. Scholars have put forward theories suggesting that drought and famine might have played a role in its demise. Others believe that attacks from neighboring kingdoms could have contributed to its downfall, but nobody really knows. The sad thing is, there isn't much left to study. Over time, the once mighty kingdom was swallowed by the sands of time. The exact location of the capital city has yet to be discovered, leaving us with more questions than answers. What did their cities look like? What happened to the people of Punt? These questions keep archaeologists up at night. The lack of physical evidence makes it difficult to paint a clear picture of Punt's way of life. We left to piece together the fragments of a rich culture that thrived in East Africa long before the rise of Egypt. Now let's travel to South Asia and explore one of the world's most enigmatic ancient civilizations. The Indus Valley Civilization. Emerging around 3300 BCE in the fertile valleys of the Indus River, this civilization flourished for over 1500 years, until its abrupt disappearance around 1300 BCE. If you've ever stood in the shadow of the Great Wall of China or marveled at the Colosseum in Rome, take a moment to imagine structures just as impressive, but which have vanished without a trace. That's the reality of the Indus Valley Civilization. These people built remarkable cities with advanced urban planning, including the famous sites of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Their cities boasted grid-like layouts, sophisticated drainage systems, and public baths. Archaeologists have uncovered seals, jewelry, and artifacts made from materials like bronze, silver, and gold, hinting at a society with advanced craftsmanship and possibly a thriving trade network. However, despite their architectural prowess and artistic skill, the Indus Valley civilization collapsed without leaving behind a written word. Nobody knows exactly why the civilization vanished. Theories range from climate change and natural disasters to the arrival of nomadic tribes and the drying up of the Indus River. Each theory adds a piece to the puzzle, but none can fully explain the sudden disappearance of these highly advanced people. All that remains are the haunting ruins and a sense of wonder about a civilization that seemingly vanished overnight. The Kingdom of Sheba. Let's shift our attention to the Kingdom of Sheba, an ancient realm often associated with the legendary Queen of Sheba. Located in present-day Yemen, this kingdom is believed to have existed from around 700 BCE to 535 BCE. Imagine yourself in a land where towering mountains meet rolling plains, where frankincense and myrrh grow in abundance, and where the Red Sea beckons with promises of distant lands. This was the setting for the Kingdom of Sheba, a place steeped in myth and legend. According to ancient texts, the Queen of Sheba was renowned for her wisdom, wealth, and beauty. She ruled over a vast empire that stretched from the coast of the Red Sea deep into the heart of Africa. Her dominion was a melting pot of cultures, a testament to her ability to forge alliances and maintain peaceful relations with diverse civilizations. The Kingdom of Sheba was not just a monarchy, it was a hub of cultural exchange and trade. The legendary Queen of Sheba is said to have traveled to Jerusalem to meet King Solomon, bringing with her an entourage of elephants and precious gifts. However, like many ancient civilizations, the Kingdom of Sheba ultimately fell. Theories abound, ranging from internal strife and economic decline to the impact of outside invaders. Yet the truth remains elusive, hidden beneath the sands of time. What led to the downfall of such a prosperous and culturally rich empire? The answer remains one of the enduring mysteries of ancient history, the Kingdom of Dogon. Let's fly over to West Africa and uncover the secrets of the Kingdom of Dogon, a civilization shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Flourishing between the 2nd century BCE and the 15th century CE, the Dogon Kingdom was situated in the mountainous regions of what is now Mali. Imagine a realm where steep cliffs and dense forests served as both a shield and a backdrop for a vibrant and resilient civilization. This was the Kingdom of Dogon, a place where tradition and innovation intertwined to create a unique way of life. The Dogon people are known for their impressive terracotta sculptures, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship, depicting scenes from their daily lives, religious beliefs, and historical events. These sculptures serve as a window into a rich cultural heritage, showcasing the artistic brilliance of a civilization that thrived in relative isolation from other African kingdoms. Yet despite their artistic achievements and strong communal bonds, the Kingdom of Dogon eventually faded into obscurity. Theories suggest that pressure from neighboring empires and the trans-Saharan trade routes may have played a role in their decline. However, the true reasons behind their disappearance remain a captivating enigma. The Kingdom of Kush. Finally, let's journey to the Kingdom of Kush, an ancient realm located in what is now Sudan. Kush existed from around 1000 BCE to 350 CE, leaving behind a legacy that continues to fascinate historians and archaeologists alike. Picture a kingdom nestled in the fertile Nile Valley, a land where the mighty river provided the lifeblood for a thriving civilization. Kush was not just a kingdom, it was a cultural powerhouse. It gave birth to the Kingdom of Meroe, known for its distinctive pyramids. Distinct from those of ancient Egypt, but equally awe-inspiring. The Kushite rulers were skilled ironworkers, producing exquisite jewelry and weaponry. They also maintained close ties with Egypt, at one point even ruling over the Egyptian kingdoms of Thebes and Memphis. Despite its cultural richness and strategic location, the Kingdom of Kush eventually succumbed to the forces of change. Theories attribute its fall to the decline of trade, the impact of the Roman Empire's expansion, and the rise of the Kingdom of Axum. However, the true cause of its demise remains a perplexing puzzle, a testament to the complexities of ancient history. As we conclude our exploration of these lost civilizations, let's remember that their stories are more than just tales of ancient times. They're a reminder of the impermanence of power, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring quest for knowledge. Each civilization we've journeyed through has left an indelible mark on history, and their legacy continues to inspire awe and wonder in the hearts of those who seek to understand our shared past. In the bustling city you call home right now, pause for a moment and imagine the echoes of laughter, the rhythm of daily life. the hopes and dreams that once filled these very streets. What if the people who walked here had a story just as captivating as those we've explored today? What if their civilization, too, had its own legends and mysteries waiting to be uncovered? In the wee hours of the morning, before Instagram goes offline for the day, and you can't get your daily fix of dog videos, let's talk about some things you couldn't build today, even with all our modern conveniences. The sun beats down on cracked stone and you wander into a workshop. There's no electricity, no Wi-Fi, no USB chargers in sight, not a single power bank within a 3-mile radius. And yet, these ancient people, whoever they were doing things we still don't fully understand. There's a perfectly carved granite block the size of a small car. Smooth, sharp, impossible. Wait, how did they do this without cranes or laser cutters? And why does my IKEA shelf collapse if I sneeze near it? This is a place where ancient builders had precision skills that rival or even mock modern tools. The pyramids of Giza are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. The Nazca lines in Peru can only be fully seen from the sky. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek gadget, was basically a 2,000-year-old analog computer. Meanwhile, I can't even get my phone charger to last more than 6 months. People back then didn't think they were making mysteries, they were just living, fixing problems, inventing things. So let's go back in time, because there are some things you simply could not do today. We're heading to Greece, specifically the island of Antikythera, which is where the titular mechanism was found in 1902, fished up from the seafloor by a team of sponge divers who probably never thought they'd be in the business of unearthing historical oddities. It was in pretty bad shape, corroded by seawater, but scholars have since restored about 2/3 of it, and its purpose is still debated. What we do know is this: the Antikythera mechanism is the oldest known gear-driven device in the world, coming in at around 200 BC, meaning it predates the Renaissance by nearly 2 millennia. But how did the ancient Greeks invent a super complex calculator, when most of the rest of the world was just figuring out how to not get murdered by a neighbor who doesn't like your new sandals? Well, for starters, the ancient Greeks were way smarter than many give them credit for. We tend to think of them as topless dudes running around saying OPA and trying to sacrifice a goat to the gods so they'll finally make it rain because the crops are withering. But while that was certainly a thing, ancient Greece was also home to philosophers, astronomers, mathematicians, and engineers, with Greek and Roman numerals being used well into the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, unlike the Romans, the Greeks weren't big on writing things down, leaving us with way more questions than answers about how the Antikythera mechanism came to be. Was it a one-off invention? Did dozens of people make copies? Were there schools teaching kids how to design these things? And how did they even come up with the idea in the first place? Alas, those are questions we might never answer. But what we do know is that recreating the Antikythera mechanism today would be pretty damn difficult. It's powered by a series of 30 bronze gears, each containing hundreds of tiny teeth, all housed in a wooden box about the size of a Game Boy. Its creators achieved this feat without any advanced metalworking tools or, hands. The entire thing was likely crafted with simple hand tools, and every piece was fitted together by hand, requiring an incredible amount of patience, skill, and math knowledge. Even worse, the whole contraption was made without any standardized units of measurement, using fractions of a unit called a stadian, which was equivalent to approximately 1/8 of a mile. The Antikythera mechanism could track everything from lunar cycles to the timing of Olympic Games. To recreate this device today, you'd need to assemble an entire team of experts, including historians, physicists, astronomers, and engineers. And even then it'd be tough to match the original. That is, unless you re one of those geniuses out there who built a full-scale replica of Hogwarts in Minecraft. Just send an email to the number provided below, and we'll get you started. Our next mystery comes from Peru, specifically the Nazca region, where thousands of years ago an advanced civilization arose that loved to draw pictures in the dirt. These included geoglyphs of monkeys, lizards, spiders, fish, hummingbirds, flowers, and straight lines so long they defied explanation. Thousands of years later, the world was still scratching its head over how the Nazca people made these lines, with theories ranging from alien intervention to compass use to irrigation ditches. Today, we know that the Nazca people used a combination of ropes, stakes, and string to map out the designs, and that they carved shallow grooves into the ground, exposing the lighter soil beneath. But that doesn't mean we understand it any better. For starters, some of the lines stretch for 13 miles. How did they keep everything lined up without modern surveying equipment? And how did they make sure the lines were straight? One theory is that they used basic tools like knotted ropes and sticks to measure distances, setting markers at regular intervals along the lines and connecting the dots. But given the accuracy required, it seems like they must have been using something like a rudimentary telescope to make sure everything was aligned correctly. Otherwise, how would they have managed to account for the curvature of the Earth? As for the shapes, they're slightly raised humps above the surface, no more than 6 inches high. But given the vast scale, creating them required moving a tremendous amount of dirt. This was no easy feat considering that Nazca workers likely didn't have any wheeled vehicles to haul things around, much less a bulldozer to move dirt by the cubic yard. Instead, they may have used llamas to drag heavy loads. Each animal could carry up to 25 pounds, so a large herd would have been necessary to haul enough dirt to build the largest humps. As for why they went through all the effort, nobody knows for sure, but some researchers speculate that the lines may have served as ceremonial pathways used during religious festivals or to mark important astronomical events. Others believe they acted as boundaries for sacred lands, or were used as a navigational aid for ships traveling along the coast. For our final example, we head to Egypt, specifically the Giza Plateau, where mankind built 3 pyramids over 4,000 years ago. The Great Pyramid is truly massive, standing 481 feet tall and spanning 13 acres at its base. But what makes it particularly special is its orientation. You see, the true north of any location is the direction a compass needle points, but it can be slightly off due to factors like magnetic interference. In other words, true north and magnetic north aren't always the same. That SY compasses are calibrated with a variation circle that shows how far off magnetic north is from true north. With that in mind, the Great Pyramid is aligned with true north within half a degree of error. If you were to drop a plumb line from the top of the pyramid, it would fall within the circle of a sphere whose center is at the Earth's north pole. Given the size of the Earth, that circle would have a radius of roughly 7,000 miles, but for the Great Pyramid, it's closer to 1/12 of a degree, just 6 inches off for every 100 feet. Now, this isn't exactly a big deal if you're planning a road trip across America, but back in Egypt, nobody had ever seen America, much less invented the concept of degrees. Not only that, but the other 2 main pyramids on the Giza Plateau are similarly accurate, with the Sphinx aligning with the sunrise on the spring equinox. Ancient Egyptians knew that the stars had predictable paths across the sky throughout the year, and by observing those paths, they were able to determine key locations like true north. They also understood concepts like geometry and trigonometry, which they used to ensure their buildings were level and their angles were accurate. The pyramids are so precise that researchers believe they were used as celestial clocks, keeping track of the passage of time by tracking the movement of the stars, and yet we can't even get our iPhones to tell the time without complaining about it on Twitter. So take a moment to appreciate just how impressive these ancient feats really are. Sure, we've come a long way since then, but sometimes it pays to look back and see how far we've come. So time to get informed, because you don't want to be caught dead calling the Aztecs barbaric without knowing how much worse things could have been. Ancient civilizations aren't just about inventing cool gadgets and stacking rocks. They had rituals that ranged from beautiful to absolutely nightmare fuel. What would an ancient civilization think of modern society? First up, let's talk about the Aztecs. Now, if you've ever accidentally sat in on a Zoom call with your camera on when you should have muted yourself, you know how awkward it can be. Imagine being the only person in your village who has seen the Spanish and their disturbing habit of sacrificing entire chickens while wearing metal masks and helmets. Then one day you get called into the village square for an obligatory human sacrifice ritual. The Aztec Emperor Moctezuma II must be feeling a little insecure, because he wants to see you wear his new golden helmet with giant scary eagle feathers before he cuts your heart out. Let's just hope you didn't spill your cocoa on the way over. The last thing this guy needs is another stain on his fancy hat. But then your worst nightmare comes true. He asks you to do the honors and cut his head off to show the Spanish what true bravery looks like. You slice off his head and toss it into the crowd, who promptly starts chanting your name. Soon everyone's talking about the day you showed those fancy-hatted foreigners a thing or two about fearsome rituals. You might be covered in blood, but at least you didn't have to make small talk. It was all adrenaline and action. The good news is that you didn't have to worry about finding a new apartment because the gods themselves provided. Now you live in a pyramid. The pyramid's actually an enormous burial mound where countless sacrifices have died and been entombed for centuries. It's not exactly Moven ready though. Time to roll up your sleeves and convert it into a home. The first order of business is digging through hundreds of years' worth of human remains and packing them into even smaller spaces. You're hoping that if the bones are all jammed in there together, nobody will notice if you take a souvenir. Shards of pottery are sticking out of the floor, and when you finally reach the top of the pyramid, you're greeted by a stunning view of a sprawling metropolis. This is a city designed for millions of people, but it's so filthy and overcrowded that it looks like one big garbage dump. And after spending the last year dodging pedestrians, you miss having a little personal space. Living in a pyramid might not be so bad after all. It's time for bed, but you're not alone. Millions of insects have made their homes inside the pyramid, and they're not shy about making their presence known. To distract yourself, you try to read your new book, The Complete Works of William Shakespeare, which you found at a bookstore for 75 cents. But it's hard to concentrate with the wind whistling through holes in the walls and the steady drip, drip, drip of water from somewhere above. Finally, you drift off to sleep and dream of spacious apartments and colony-sized tubs of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Then you wake up covered in bug bites and realize you left the front door open. The constant fear of losing your life in a freak accident is really starting to add up. Maybe living in a pyramid wasn't such a great idea after all. You pack up your things and hit the road, heading south to the pyramids of Palenque. You've heard the ancient Maya here developed a writing system, which means you could ask someone out on a date instead of having to fight them in a brutal battle of wits, strength, and agility. You mean, if you survive, you'll ask them out. But then you remember, you don't speak a word of Maya. Uh-oh, the language barrier is real. On the bright side, it's hot cockle summer, so you pull out your phone to order some online. Unfortunately, the only restaurant that delivers is serving a special dish called toasted iguana. You're willing to be adventurous, but it comes with a side of dread. You also can't shake the feeling that somebody's watching you. When you look around, you see a woman in traditional Mayan clothing staring intently from across the market. Is she giving you the evil eye? You feel a chill down your spine, even though the jungle heat makes you sweat like you just ran a marathon. But then you remember that you don't believe in the supernatural. You tell yourself it's probably just a coincidence. But the Maya believed the jaguar was a supernatural creature who guided the souls of the dead to the underworld. And right now you're surrounded by jaguars. You spot a guy carrying a ball made of solid gold. You think back to the ancient Maya ball game, where players tried to push a ball through a stone hoop. Except that game had a catch. If you missed, you got sacrificed. These guys are playing for keeps. You decide it's best not to stick around and see who wins. Instead, you sneak into a temple to hide. Turns out, it's not a good idea. Inside you hear chains dragging metal moans. Someone's trapped in here and they're dying. You rush to help, but it's too late. They're already gone. And standing in front of you is a priest, dressed like a skeleton. He lunges forward with a knife and shouts, "Beware the god of death." Maybe you should have stayed outside. Back in the present, you wonder what other terrifying rituals you missed out on. In Egypt, there was mummification, the process of preserving a body by removing its organs and wrapping it in bandages. That sounds a little creepy. And then there was animal sacrifice. Yeah, apparently every culture had that in common. The Egyptians also had human sacrifice, and they took it to the next level. Some pharaohs were buried with their enemies, servants, and sometimes even their family members. We're not sure why. Since no written records survived, the Egyptians either recycled paper or burned it, so we're left scratching our heads. What was New Kingdom royalty so afraid of? They believed they'd be reincarnated as jackdaws, and then they'd fly away to a place called sycamore trees forever. No more paperwork, meetings, or traffic jams. Well, what about some good old-fashioned religious fervor? The Assyrians had that in spades. Sometimes they unleashed poisonous snakes into the audience at gladiator games to thin the crowds, but for sheer nightmare fuel. Nothing beats the Canaanites who lived between 2000 and 700 BC in what's now Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. Their religion centered around a supreme deity named El and a whole host of messed up gods and goddesses. One of them was Anot, a fertility goddess who liked to party. And by party, I mean stab people with a sword until they gushed blood. The Canaanites brought the whole town to their local sporting event, which was basically a giant bloodbath where warriors charged at each other on horseback and hacked each other to pieces. The winner, well, they got to say, "Bring me the severed heads of 7 warriors." What? No heads? The Canaanites set up stalls, selling them, kind of like a medieval head shop, and once you had enough, you could hand them over to the queen, who would chop them off herself. So if you were invited to a Canaanite party, you had a choice to make: bring wine and a hymn to Anot, or bring your head. In the end, the craziest rituals might belong to the Mesopotamians, who built towering ziggurats as homes for their gods. Some temples doubled as ritual breweries, which sounds fun until you remember they also practiced human sacrifice. Nothing says spiritual enlightenment like a cold glass of suds. The Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians created religions so complex they were practically full-time jobs. Priests performed daily ceremonies to keep the gods happy, and that included brewing them massive amounts of beer. Every day they ground barley in water, mixed in yeast, and left it to ferment. After all that work, they had to throw in a few human sacrifices. Pluck some chicken hearts out of an oven. They loved parties, food, sports, and even fashion. In fact, archaeologists recently found a pair of high heels in Egypt, leading experts to speculate that ancient pharaohs were totally into stilettos. You step outside, squinting in the morning sun, and instantly hear it. A donkey braying, someone arguing about water rights, the clang of a blacksmith hammering out the same tool he's made 600 times today. Daily life was gritty, loud and soaked in smells, sweat, smoke, and whatever's rotting in the corner. No perfume could hide the reality of living with animals and humans in close quarters. But these people laughed, gossiped, hustled, and hustled harder because life was short. Survival was a full-time job, and TikTok dances hadn't been invented yet. Today we're going to look at how the ancient world would have smelled. And if you like this, check out our video on what the ancient world sounded like. Smells bring back memories so powerfully that scientists have even unlocked scent memories in blind and deaf people, who couldn't possibly have learned the association through sight or hearing. Our sense of smell is the most powerful sense tied to memory. It's also incredibly personal, which makes it one of the keys to understanding how people lived in the past. The trouble is that written records rarely mention odors unless they're pleasant. In Greek and Roman literature, there are many references to perfumes and incense, but rarely any discussion of their cloying power to mask smells. Archaeologists can analyze organic remains to get some sense of what everyday objects smelled like. But unless something was preserved in amber or actual mummies, all we can really say is that it probably smelled like, well, you'll just have to imagine. So for this video, we asked ourselves, what would the people of antiquity have noticed when they walked down the street? What would have registered in their brains as strange or wonderful or disgusting or familiar? These are the smells that stuck in their memory, the ones they talked about over dinner or at the market. And those are the smells that reveal the truth about their daily lives. What do you know about ancient Egyptian daily life? Maybe that the pharaohs dressed in fine linen and rode around in golden chariots. If you were an ancient Egyptian, though, the biggest thing you might have noticed about your surroundings was the smells of sewage and industry. The stench of wastewater filled the streets and canals of Egyptian cities. Garbage disposal was rudimentary at best, so the streets were littered with refuse and animal carcasses. This wasn't just unpleasant, it was dangerous. Without refrigeration, garbage quickly rotted, attracting rats and flies that spread disease. Egypt had some advanced medicine, but it was still a time when an infected cut could kill you. For everyone, rich and poor alike, the toilet was a hole in the ground, usually shared by several families. Ancient Egyptians believed that water carried disease, so instead of flushing toilets, they poured urine, often from a metal bottle, into the latrine to deodorize it. Urine was also used to clean the body and clothes, and even to treat scorpion stings. People wore perfume and burned incense to try to mask the constant smells of decay and unwashed bodies, but nothing really worked. In Alexandria, the famous port city built by Alexander the Great, visitors complained of such terrible smells that they nicknamed the city Stinkingia. Even so, the city tried to manage its waste. Officials emptied the public toilets every 3 days and threw the contents into the river. The workers who did this job were paid double because no one else wanted the assignment. When visiting Alexandria, you might have stayed in a hotel, but the accommodations wouldn't have been much better. You'd have slept on a bed made of a rush mat or palm branches, eaten on a table with a stone slab set into the wall, and used a jar or shell for a toilet. The ancient Greeks weren't big on indoor plumbing either. Their public bathrooms were notoriously dirty places where people would cover themselves with ashes instead of toilet paper. The rich might have had a private bathroom, but the urine-soaked sponge on a stick they used for cleaning would hardly have left it smelling sweeter than a public bathroom. It didn't help that Greek houses didn't have windows or chimneys. There was only one way to air out the house: open the door. It wasn't just at home that ancient Greeks encountered gross-out smells. They were famous for their public baths, which doubled as social clubs and gossip centers. Patrons shared nude massages and scraped themselves with a sharp stone tool called a... That may sound pretty tame until you realize that the patrons covered themselves with a thick paste made of flour and water before scraping themselves. The scraps would come off with the dead skin, leaving the bather smooth and ready for a soapy scrub. This sounds sort of like making a paste out of baking soda and vinegar, except that the ancient Greeks added something else to the mix: the ashes of burnt bones. These ashes contained calcium, which acted as an explicant. So while getting a massage from an old man with bad breath, you could be sure that you'd be leaving the bathhouse smoother than you came in. No matter where you went in the ancient Greek world, the smell of blood and sweat would be hard to avoid. The Greeks loved watching blood sports, which took place not only in the famous Colosseum in Rome, but also in the streets. Wild animal hunts were popular pastimes for the wealthy, and criminals could be forced to fight lions to the death as punishment for their crimes. Slavery was widespread in Greece, and slaves were forced to work long hours with little food or water. It's not surprising, then, that the Temple of Apollo, one of the most important religious sites in Greece, housed a special statue dedicated to the god of healing. The worshippers hoped that Apollo would heal them from diseases that stank up their lives, like leprosy and gangrenous ulcers. Ancient Romans took sanitation more seriously than the Greeks, with elaborate aqueducts bringing fresh water to the city. Emperor Nero even built public bathrooms with attendants to hand out towels, though this was as much for show as anything else. He wanted people to think that Rome was more civilized than other cities, when really it was just as smelly. In the Roman Empire, the emperor's nose was very attuned to smells, both good and bad. Caligula liked his palace to smell like cinnamon and frankincense, while Nero passed laws about how people should smell, banning people who bathed too often and stunk up the place with perfume. Slaves cleaned latrines and public buildings, but the smell of stale waste lingered everywhere. Emperor Nero even banned people from using urine for cleaning. Visitors to Rome described the city's smells as so bad that they could make a grown man gag. If you wanted to be wined and dined in Rome, you'd want to choose your restaurant carefully. Taverns and brothels were avoided because of the crowds and the smells. Instead, the elite ate at restaurants that specialized in serving a single dish. These restaurants were cheaper and cleaner, but you'd have to get your hands dirty eating something like roasted pig or a boiled sheep's head. To get a bit of variety, you could visit one of the many street vendors selling second-rate food. The options included things like eggs, cheese, fruit or nuts, but you never knew how fresh they were. Emperor Nero also banned prostitutes from the taverns and brothels. In the Far East, people had developed some unique ways to deal with the problem of human waste. In China, urine was used to clean clothes and the streets. The Chinese also developed a type of flush toilet that used water to wash away solid waste. But even with these innovations, there were still plenty of smells to go around. The average Chinese person might have been less likely to encounter a toilet than a kitchen fire. Cooking was done over wood or charcoal fires inside the home, but the wealthy enjoyed exotic foods delivered from faraway lands. Ducks from the Yangtze River, fish from the Yellow Sea, pork from the north, rice from the south. There was even an import of fragrant spices from India and Southeast Asia, because these foods were brought in from far away. They were expensive. Rare spices like cinnamon and pepper were worth twice as much as gold. One of the most pungent smells in the ancient world was that of incense burning in a temple. This was especially true in India, where incense was an integral part of religious ceremonies. Some of the oldest perfumes ever discovered have been found in Indian Harappan sites dating back as far as 2800 BC. The ingredients in these perfumes were gathered all over the subcontinent. These fragrances were layered in tiny amounts to create complex scents that were pleasing to the gods and smelled amazing to humans. 2. We now travel all over the world looking at 10 ancient garbage dumps that reveal everything about how people lived thousands of years ago. And we're not talking about big archaeological sites. Those are the popular tourist traps where everybody goes, takes a quick picture, gets some Instagram clout and then moves on before actually learning anything. These are hidden treasures that most tourists will never see. So hold on to your hats because we're about to go back in time. And now let's go back to the present day and look at number 10, the Bronze Age rubbish dump at Shiloroko Plain in Greece. This was excavated by a team from the University of Vienna. And the reason why it is so exciting is because it contains the oldest discarded items ever found in the Eastern Mediterranean. What they discovered is a snapshot of daily life around 3,200 years ago. The amazing thing about garbage dumps is that they refull of stuff that was considered disposable at the time. Archaeologists were able to learn all kinds of things about these people that would not have been obvious otherwise. For example, they learned that at the height of the Bronze Age, which was a time when kings ruled like gods over their people, everyone used the same cups, plates and bowls. But archaeologists also found a lot of broken dishes. Turns out that making ceramics was a cottage industry. Every woman could make her own pottery, but no one was very good at it. After centuries of practice, the only major difference between a king's dinner plate and a peasant's bowl was the artwork on the side. The Viennese team also uncovered the earliest known remnants of hazelnut processing. That means whoever lived here had to have been cultivating hazelnuts for food. They also brought sheep and goats up from the south. There were also signs that the locals were growing grapes, olives, and grain. Unfortunately, the civilization ended rather abruptly when the Mycenaean Greeks showed up and burned down the town. Now that makes me really sad. Maybe that's why every single pot was shattered. They did it on purpose. But now we have to move on from broken pottery to something even more gross, which brings us to 9. The Roman latrines at the House of the Silver Wedding at Pompeii. Alright, let's be honest. We don't need to be in ancient Rome to use public bathrooms that look like this. You can find them in any subway station in New York City. But wait, don't turn away just yet. I know what you're thinking. You don't want to hear about toilets. Who cares about toilets? Come on, you gotta admit you're curious what people wrote on the walls. After all, what's the best thing about a public bathroom? The House of the Silver Wedding is a particularly nice example of a Roman domus. It's decorated with beautiful frescoes and mosaics, and it belonged to a wealthy couple who got married for the second time after one of them was widowed. All kinds of people lived in Pompeii, from slaves to freedmen to senators, and they all used the same public bathrooms. Most Romans didn't have indoor plumbing, so this would have been an important community amenity. Instead of toilet paper, they used a small wooden spatula called a terbium. It's kind of like a popsicle stick, except instead of tasting delicious chocolate fudge and vanilla, it tasted like cleaning your ass. One of the most famous pieces of Pompeii graffiti was written by a slave named Felix who complained about having to work on a Sunday. Another slave, Crescus, said he hopes his master dies. To the untrained eye, it might look like a warning about a vicious pooch, but in reality, it was an invitation to an erotic encounter. It turns out that Roman graffiti wasn't too different from modern day, except back then, you couldn't get banned from Instagram for posting it, so now we have to go way farther back in history to know. 8. The Neolithic garbage dump at Tel El Ajul in Jordan. We have no idea how old this site is because it has not been excavated yet. It was identified by satellite imagery and is still waiting for someone to come and explore it. As far as we know, it's the largest garbage dump in the entire Middle East from the era when agriculture was first invented. At the moment, we know basically nothing about it. So this entry is really just to put it on your bucket list. The entire area is littered with prehistoric ceramics and animal bones. There are prehistoric arrowheads and scrapers made of flint and obsidian. The edges of the settlement were used as a dumping ground for things that broke or became unusable, like old tools and weapons. These people likely settled in the area around 7000 BCE, which was during the Neolithic Revolution. That's the period when humans switched from being nomadic hunters and gatherers to living in one place and raising crops and livestock. It's thought that Tel El Ajel was occupied continuously until the Muslim conquest of Jordan in the 7th century CE. This means the garbage dump will contain layers of artifacts from thousands of years of history. Hopefully, one day we'll get to find out what's there. In the meantime, though, we have to move on to number 7, the Iron Age garbage pit near Naropa, India. This was excavated in 2014, and it turned out to be a real treasure trove. The site dates back to 2,300 years ago, which puts it in the middle of the reign of the Mauryan Empire. It was the first empire to unify most of the Indian subcontinent. It was founded by Chandragupta Maurya, who took the throne in 322 BCE and ruled until 298 BCE. He was succeeded by his son, Binjasara, who was succeeded by Ashoka, the Great. If you've heard of Buddhism in India, you probably have heard of Ashoka. He converted to Buddhism while mourning the destruction he caused during a war and spent the rest of his life trying to make amends. Back to the garbage dump. Buried inside was an array of broken domestic items, including cooking pots, storage jars, and incense burners. Archaeologists believe the people who lived here were part of the lower classes. Their lifestyle was characterized by the use of perishable materials such as wood and bamboo. but those materials decompose so quickly that almost nothing of them remains today. Luckily, they still left behind their ceramic wares, including bowls and dishes. Analysis of the ceramics revealed that they were produced in a wide variety of styles and from multiple regions across India. That indicates there was a lot of trade going on at the time. Some of the wares were produced as far away as Afghanistan and the Deccan Plateau. It's possible that these items were imported by merchants, then discarded, once they were no longer useful. In fact, the presence of foreign goods in the garbage dump suggests that the city of Naropa was a commercial hub. There were also animal bones from domesticated cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. Researchers say the garbage pit tells us about ordinary people who don't usually show up in the historical record. Now we have to cross the ocean to get to number 6, the garbage dump at Cahokia, Illinois. This is the largest pre-Columbian Native American site east of the Mississippi. It flourished from about 600 to 1400 CE, although Native Americans had been living in the area for much longer than that. At its peak, Cahokia was home to about 10,000 people, making it larger than London at the time. It's not clear why people stopped living there, but today it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Archaeologists have found all kinds of fascinating things at Cahokia, including a skull that had been deliberately crushed, evidence of copper mining in Wisconsin, and rare tropical birds that flew all the way from Central America. What's so great about garbage dumps is that they preserve things that were everyday objects. For example, archaeologists found chert, which is a kind of rock that was used to make arrowheads. They also found scrapers and knives made from animal bones. Unfortunately, the garbage dump was also full of animal bones that were left over after butchering deer, elk, bison, bear, and mountain lion. The sun dips below the horizon and paints the sky in hues of orange and purple. In the distance, the wind carries the scent of wood smoke and freshly turned earth from the farmers tending their fields. You take it all in, letting the peaceful scene soothe your weary bones. Then you notice something. The crops are too perfect. There isn't a weed in sight. And where are the birds that should be nesting in the trees? Then you see them, hundreds of identical houses, each with neat rows of vegetables growing outside. And then there's the fortress in the distance, silent and imposing. The air is too still. The silence is unnerving. You feel a prickle on the back of your neck, the sense of being watched. Suddenly, a shadow detaches itself from the darkness beyond the riverbank, a single figure striding towards you, tall and muscular. His skin is the color of burnished copper and his eyes gleam like polished obsidian. His jaw is set with determination and his gaze is fixed on you. He stops a few feet away, inclining his head slightly. Who are you? His voice resonates with power. And what brings you to this place? The truth is, you have no idea how you got here. Everything is alien to you. You don't know this world, its rules, or its people. All you know is the desire to survive and maybe get back home. But right now, you can't even remember where home is. It's like the memory of a dream slipping through your fingers. This is not your world, but it is your story. Welcome to Lost Cities, where you awaken without memories, alone in an unfamiliar land, with only your wits and a backpack full of survival gear, to help you uncover the secrets of this forgotten civilization and ultimately discover who you are and why you were sent here. The city stretches before you, a vast labyrinth of crumbling structures and overgrown pathways. Vines and creeping plants weave between broken columns, forming natural arches overhead. Everywhere, nature seems to reclaim the cityscape, turning it into a wild, untamed jungle. Broken statues lie half buried in dirt, their faces eroded by time. Graffiti and markings decorate many of the walls, but they're unlike any language you recognize. But then you find it, a scrap of paper tucked behind a loose brick, and on it, written in shaky handwriting, are the words "Follow the river." So you do. The river winds through the ruins, its banks littered with debris. As you walk, you hear the splash of water and the chirp of insects. Suddenly, a flash of movement catches your eye. A small lizard darts across your path and disappears up a tree. Not far off, a bird takes flight, startled by your presence. After a while, the river opens into a small clearing, and there in front of you sits an old stone building, its roof caved in, revealing a glimpse of the sky. Vines hang from its crumbling walls, and weeds sprout between the cracks in the stones. What looks like a doorway beckons you closer. When you enter, the stench of decay hits you immediately. The air is thick with the musky odor of ages past, and dust motes dance in the slivers of sunlight piercing the gloom. In the center of the room, you spot a pile of rubble. As you approach, you see that it's not just rubble, but a well-hidden cache of items, carefully concealed beneath fallen stones. Among the grime and decay, you find 3 items. An ancient book bound in leather, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. A chipped clay tablet etched with mysterious symbols, and a simple wooden box adorned with faded carvings. These items are more than just relics of the past. Each holds a piece of the puzzle that is your identity. The book might contain knowledge about this lost civilization, perhaps even clues about your origins. The clay tablet with its cryptic symbols could hold a message specifically for you, a message from your past that has echoed through time. And then there's the wooden box, its carvings hinting at secrets waiting to be unlocked. Your first instinct is to examine the book. Its worn cover feels like sandpaper against your fingertips. As you carefully open it, the musty smell of aged paper fills your nostrils. The script within is flowing and elegant, yet utterly alien to you. But as you turn the brittle pages, you notice a sketch, a drawing of a man. His features seem vaguely familiar, and there's something about the intensity of his gaze that draws you in. Could this be a long-lost relative of yours? Does this book hold the key to unlocking your own past? Lost Cities is a game of exploration, survival, and discovery. Your choices determine how your story unfolds. Will you brave perilous journeys to uncover ancient secrets? Will you delve into dangerous ruins to unearth hidden artifacts? Or will you focus on building alliances with the enigmatic locals? You must manage your resources, ensuring you have enough food and supplies to stay alive. The environment is unforgiving, and the ruins hold countless dangers, from crumbling structures to unknown wildlife. Yet, as you explore, you'll encounter other survivors, some wary, some friendly. The relationships you forge will be crucial to your survival and will shape your understanding of this lost civilization. As you continue exploring the ruins, you come across evidence of the lives that once thrived here. You find remnants of meals, suggesting that life wasn't always easy. Scattered tools hint at the labor required to sustain a society, and in quieter moments, you might even hear the faint echoes of laughter and conversation, making this place feel less like a museum and more like a home. But as night falls, the ruins take on a different feel. The wind whispers through the gaps in the buildings, carrying with it the unsettling sounds of the night. Strange nocturnal creatures stir, and the darkness seems to pulse with unseen energy. The safety of the daytime seems a distant memory. Now you must rely on your instincts and your wits to navigate the perils of the night. In the morning, you discover something that changes everything. Carved into a stone monolith is a face. It's weathered and worn, but there's something about it that seems strangely familiar. You reach out to touch it, and in that instant, a jolt of recognition courses through you. This isn't just a random carving, it's a portrait of you, or at least who you once were. But how can this be? How can you be connected to this ancient civilization? And if so, why have you been brought here? The secrets of your past are calling to you, echoing through the ages, and as you stand there contemplating the mysteries of your existence, you realize that your journey has just begun. The civilization that once thrived here was not immune to the problems that plague humanity even today. Politics played a significant role in the rise and fall of this civilization, shaping their culture, economy, and ultimately their fate. Alliances shifted, rivalries intensified, and the thirst for power led to conflict and ultimately contributed to their downfall. Their story serves as a reminder that even the greatest civilizations are not invincible, and that the pursuit of power unchecked can lead to ruin. Religion was deeply ingrained in their society, influencing their beliefs, values, and daily lives. The ruins themselves often bear testament to their faith, with many structures serving as places of worship or burial grounds. Understanding their religious practices can offer insights into their worldview and the rituals that gave meaning to their existence. Trade was vital to their prosperity, connecting them to distant regions and facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures. The remains of marketplaces and artifacts from faraway lands tell tales of their far-reaching networks. By exploring their trade routes and trading partners, you can understand how this civilization integrated into a larger world. The art and architecture of this lost civilization are not merely aesthetic marvels, they're windows into their soul. From intricately carved statues to the layout of their cities, every creation tells a story. Their artistic expressions reveal their values, beliefs, and the stories they wanted to convey to the world. The lost city whispers stories of those who came before us, reminding us that our world is built on the foundation of the past. These ruins are more than just crumbling stones. They are the silent witnesses to lives lived, decisions made, and legacies left behind. Every artifact, every structure, every inscription is a brushstroke in the grand tapestry of history. A group of elite athletes are running full speed toward the end of the race. One by one, they cross the line, collapsing soon after in a mix of exhaustion and relief. Now imagine if as they approached the finish line, one by one they vanished into thin air. Every athlete, every spectator, every living thing in the stadium, poof, gone. Well, today we're going on a ghost hunt to find out what happened to some very real cities that suffered sudden population loss. From the sudden disappearance of a 60-mile-long city to the puzzling vanishing of an entire nation. There are many historical examples of societies whose populations vanished from their homes with nary a trace. So let us explore 5 of these abandoned places that may or may not still be haunted by the ghosts of their former residents. First stop, the mysterious lost city of Atlantis. Okay, so maybe it was Plato who first described the legendary island kingdom of Atlantis more than 2,000 years ago. In his philosophical treatise he describes a powerful naval empire that dominated the Mediterranean until its hubris caused the gods to punish them and sink their city into the ocean overnight. Scholars debate whether Plato based this tale on actual events or if the story was purely allegorical. But for our purposes today, let's assume that Atlantis did exist and that its civilization truly vanished beneath the waves. Today, people often mistakenly think of Atlantis as a mythical place. However, scientists believe there may have been a historical basis for Plato's fantastical descriptions. Many scholars think that Plato's Atlantis could have been inspired by the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. The Minoans were a Bronze Age culture whose society flourished from around 2700 BC until 1450 BC, known for their art, architecture, and intriguing connection to the legendary King Minos. According to legend, King Minos requested a magnificent white bull from Poseidon as a gift, and when Poseidon was angered by the king's refusal to release the animal, he caused the island to be destroyed in an earthquake and submerged underwater. Could this myth have originated from a natural disaster such as a volcanic eruption or a tsunami? Perhaps. We may never know for sure. But if you want to experience the eerie feeling of visiting an abandoned place, you can check out the ruins of the Minoan city of Akrotiri, which was preserved under volcanic ash when Mount Thera erupted and created the famous Santorini caldera. It's often called the real-life Atlantis. Now let's travel back in time to 3,000 years before the fall of Atlantis. Imagine you've just had an intense battle with your neighbors over some prime real estate. Your side has won, but at what cost? As you survey the damage to your city, it's clear that rebuilding will take months. You look up at the skeletal remains of houses against the night sky and wonder how long your food supplies will last. Will the drought continue and ruin your crops again next year? Will your enemies return while you're vulnerable? Is your society even worth saving? Sometime around 2200 BC, the inhabitants of the ancient city of Kish faced these kinds of questions. Located in what is now southern Iraq, Kish was the capital of one of the earliest known empires in Mesopotamia. Its ziggurat, a massive stepped pyramid temple, dominated the skyline, serving as both a house of worship and a symbol of authority for the ruling elite. But by the 20th century BC, Kish was abandoned. In fact, new excavations suggest that the city was eerily deserted within a span of only a few decades. Archaeological evidence shows that the city's population suddenly fled without warning. Researchers found half-finished projects, meals abandoned on tables, personal belongings left in place, and clothing strewn about as if the citizens were forced to leave their homes in haste. There are also signs that the city suffered destruction and violence, perhaps as a result of war or invasion. But there are no mass graves, no evidence of prolonged conflict, and no indication of a slow decline. The people of Kish simply vanished, and we don't know why. Let us fast forward a couple thousand years and head across the globe to the northwestern corner of South America. There, high in the mountains of Guatemala, lies the archaeological site of El Pilar. The site served as the ceremonial and administrative center of the Maya city-state of Tikal during the Classic period. Roughly from 250 to 900 AD, it's home to several of the Mayas' greatest architectural achievements, including the stepped pyramid known as the Temple of the Inscriptions, where archaeologists discovered the tomb of King Pakal the Great. Yet, despite its grandeur and cultural significance, El Pilar was abandoned during the 9th century, along with most of the other Maya cities. In the past, it was believed that the Maya abandoned their cities because of gradual environmental degradation and increasing dryness, which caused food shortages and eventually led to warfare and societal collapse. But recent research suggests that the Maya didn't vanish due to ecological change. Instead, scholars now believe that droughts did play a role, But those droughts occurred on a massive scale, perhaps linked to a cycle of tropical Pacific climate change known as the Southern Oscillation. These megadroughts coincided with the collapse of other Mesoamerican civilizations like the Zapotec and the classic Pueblo peoples. Yet despite the abandonment of countless Maya cities, some Maya communities survived and their descendants still live in the Yucatan Peninsula and Central America today. Their oral histories tell tales of a great flood that devastated their homeland, stories that seem to align with the timing of the megadrought and the disappearance of the classic Maya. Although the cause of the civilization's collapse remains uncertain, scholars agree that its decline was rapid, leaving behind eerily empty cities that are now home only to ghosts. Now let's journey back to Mesopotamia. This time we're headed to the ancient city of Tel Brok, located in northeastern Syria near the modern border with Turkey. Once a thriving metropolis, Tel Brok was the capital of the Mitanni Empire during the Late Bronze Age. The Mitanni were a mysterious people whose language remains undeciphered, yet they left behind impressive ruins that hint at a rich history. Excavations at Tel Brok revealed a well-planned city with temples, palaces, and ordinary houses. The discovery of Egyptian artifacts also suggests that the Mitanni maintained diplomatic relations with Egypt. But by 1350 BC, Tel Brok was abandoned. Over the centuries, various groups tried to settle the land again, but each time they were forced to flee due to invading armies and harsh environmental conditions. Today, the site is covered in the ruins of multiple civilizations, and is still occupied by a small number of families, though we can only hope they leave soon and turn it into a haunted house Airbnb. But seriously, the lack of a clear reason for the city's abandonment adds to its eerie atmosphere. Was there a sudden influx of ghosts that scared away its inhabitants, or did the spirits of its former residents simply refuse to leave their beloved city? And now we come to the final entry in our tour of abandoned places. Kataluk is a Neolithic settlement in southern Turkey that dates back to around 7500 BC. It was one of the world's first cities, home to thousands of people who lived in mud brick houses and worshipped a variety of deities. Kataluk was built during a period of great change and innovation. The Ice Age had just ended, giving way to a warmer climate and new agricultural possibilities. Humans were beginning to domesticate animals, experiment with pottery, and create complex social structures. Kataluk was at the heart of this transformation, but around 5700 BC, for reasons unknown, the city was abruptly abandoned. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that the city's population gradually dwindled until it was nearly deserted. Unlike the previous examples on our list, however, Kataluk doesn't have a singular explanation for its downfall. Some researchers attribute it to environmental change, citing evidence of a drying climate and depleted soil quality. Others blame internal conflict, pointing to a large skull found inside a pit filled with burnt bones. Some believe that the city fell victim to disease, while others think that its residents were conquered by outside forces. What makes Kataluk particularly haunting is that its buildings seem to have been emptied and locked up, rather than hastily abandoned. People finished their projects, put their tools away, and sealed their doors as if expecting to return. It's almost as if the spirits of the city decided to lock down their domain and leave it empty forever. So there you have it, a glimpse into 5 places where people seemingly vanished into thin air. He was the king of Mycenae, a legendary warrior who led the Greek forces in the Trojan War, and supposedly one of the first rulers of the Mycenaean civilization. That would be great to know if there wasn't a catch. Unfortunately, when Heinrich Schliemann discovered his tomb in 1876, he also unleashed one of the wildest stories in archaeological history. You see, while excavating the site, Schliemann discovered the mask you see right here, along with dozens of other treasures, and he claimed it was the mask of Agamemnon himself. Naturally, he took it home with him. Then his wife committed suicide, and finally, the archaeologist himself was murdered by a member of his own staff. Now, was it the mask? Maybe. After all, he took it from the grave, even though he didn't believe in curses. In fact, he called them ridiculous and unscientific. Too bad science can't explain away all of the strange coincidences that have followed the mask since. For example, it disappeared in 1938 only to turn up in a German museum after World War II. By then, it had gained some extra baggage, namely that it was stolen by Nazis and cursed. Either way, it's now back in Greece and safely locked away. It's hard to know where to start, but let's try with Ramses the Piper, shall we? Anyway, after he died, the priests at his temple built a mummy case for his heart and buried it separately. No big deal, except centuries later, when it was unearthed, it was covered in mysterious black ooze. Was it cursed? Not long after, in 1881, someone broke into the British Museum to steal pieces of Ramses, the Piper's mummy. So maybe that was a curse. When Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb, Lord Carnarvon, his sponsor, was bitten by a mosquito and died soon after. But it gets worse. When Carter himself discovered the burial chamber, he found a warning inscribed on the wall: "Beware, the place of the living is not here, but under the earth you shall find peace, neither in the darkness nor in the light of day." Did he heed the warning? Of course not. But just a few weeks later, his sister died suddenly. Okay, so maybe it was a coincidence. What about when Carter's wife found an alabaster coffin inside the tomb and accidentally knocked it over? It split open to reveal bones, which turned out to be from a priestess and a small child. The discovery of a lifetime. Sure, you wouldn't think a guy known for his military genius would end up defeated by a ghost. But when Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt, the spirits of the past had other plans. It all started when Napoleon decided to occupy Egypt, an idea his advisors warned him against, citing the country's reputation for bringing down entire civilizations. His army arrived in 1798, and from there, things went downhill. They were ambushed by Mamluk cavalrymen, disease spread through the ranks. Eventually, Napoleon was forced to flee, leaving behind hundreds of wounded soldiers, and when he returned to France, he brought something with him: the Black Stone of the Nile, an ancient obelisk covered in hieroglyphics. Soon after, strange things happened to Napoleon, like visions of Egyptian gods, dreams of mummies, and inexplicable headaches. Eventually, he fell ill and died, and some blamed the obelisk. Beware of the wrath of Ra, the sun god, and Napoleon certainly faced a lot of wrath, so maybe there's something to the curse of the Black Stone. The skull was part of a collection belonging to Dominican monk Felix Jimeno. Apparently, he got it from a friend who got it from an uncontacted indigenous tribe. Hey, next time you hear someone say don't take relics from tribes you don't understand, listen to them. Sure enough, as soon as the skull entered the monastery, bad things began to happen. Doors slammed shut, objects flew across the room, and ghostly apparitions appeared out of nowhere. Finally, Father Matteo Deosio ordered the relic be taken out. Well, allegedly, the skull belonged to a powerful shaman, who swore revenge on those who disturb his remains. Plus, according to legend, it came with a warning. One day, the shaman spoke to his tribe about the day his skull would be stolen. He promised that his spirit would travel around the world 3 times before finally resting. When that happened, he said, "When you hear my skull knock 3 times, bury me deep in the ground." Number 6. Dracula's Guest Book. When Sir William Congreve visited Transylvania in 1839, he hoped to track down the legendary Vlad Tepes, aka Dracula, and he almost got his wish. See, Vlad was rumored to have died in 1476, but the explorer wanted proof. Unfortunately, he never found any evidence of Dracula's death. But he did visit the local inn where locals told him about a mysterious guest book. It belonged to Vlad and dated back to his reign as prince. Now Congreve knew exactly what to do. From that moment on, he suffered severe stomach pain, eventually dying just 4 months later. Of course, his condition could have been due to a number of factors. After all, this was 1839 and doctors were still figuring out how not to kill patients. But one thing's for sure, the curse of Dracula was nothing if not dramatic. Just ask Abraham Van Helsing, the hero of Bram Stoker's novel, who learned that Vlad was actually immortal. That means he's still out there, hiding in the shadows. No. 5. Phidias and the Curse of the Charioteers. Phidias was a legendary sculptor of the Golden Age of Athens, responsible for some of the most breathtaking works of art ever created. Take for example, the bronze chariot of the sun god Helios, a masterpiece commissioned by the tyrant Pisistratus. But this particular project turned out to be more trouble than it was worth. As Phidias worked on the sculpture, he realized it was taking longer than expected, so he asked for an extension. Only problem was the deadline was set in stone. You see, Pisistratos planned to use the statue to cheat during the Panathenaic procession, an important religious festival held every 4 years in Athens. But the sculptor needed more time, and in a rage, the tyrant sentenced him to death. Legend has it that the finished chariot broke apart and crushed Phidias to death. Some say it was divine retribution for his hubris. After all, the Greeks believed that art should only be created to honor the gods, not for a tyrant's whims. Either way, it's a lesson in history that sometimes talent and genius aren't enough to save you from a terrible ending. No. 4. The Curse of the Drowned King. While exploring the ocean floor near Denmark, Archaeologists stumbled upon a sunken ship carrying a life-sized wax figure of King Christian VIII. According to legend, the king was cursed, and they were about to find out why. You see, the king was laid to rest in 1848, and 7 years later, a new pier was built right where his ship had sunk. Legend has it that whenever the pier was repaired, someone would get killed. But there was more to the story. You see, when archaeologists discovered the effigy, they also uncovered a wooden chest containing the king's personal belongings. That included his clothes, shoes, jewelry, and even his pocket watch. Either way, that wasn't the last surprise the drowned king had in store. 1 week after the discovery, a violent storm hit the coast, claiming the lives of 2 divers. Talk about a curse. In 1891, Catherine de Oriso discovered a skeleton in her attic. Big deal, except the deceased had a bullet hole in his head and a voodoo doll bearing his name stuck inside his ribcage. And just like that, the New Orleans police were dealing with their first suspected case of voodoo. But was it a murder or a curse? The only way to get rid of a curse is to return home and make amends with the aggrieved party. It's unclear. But what is clear is that shortly after the body was buried, Catherine herself became seriously ill. Her health deteriorated quickly, and she died just a few days later. Now, was it the curse? Well, it certainly didn't help matters. After all, when her nephew tried to remove the doll from the grave, he was struck by lightning. Yeah, that happened. But regardless, Catherine's death shook the town, leading people to believe that the vengeful spirit of Hector was haunting them. To this day, no one knows if he was the victim of a murder or a curse. Alcatraz Island is synonymous with one thing: housing the worst criminals the United States has ever seen. But once it closed its doors in 1963, it became the property of the US government. Or did it? You see, when it was being decommissioned, inmates reported hearing voices, seeing figures in the halls, and feeling an overwhelming sense of despair. When officials toured the abandoned building, they heard footsteps, clanging metal bars, and even phantom shouts and screams. Guards stationed on the island have reported mysterious lights in the cells and shadowy figures standing at the windows. Some have even captured photos of actual ghosts. Then there's the legend of George "Machine Gun" Kelly, a notorious gangster who escaped in 1933 only to be caught a few months later. They say his ghost still roams the halls of Alcatraz, looking for the 2 guards who betrayed him. But are these stories true? Well, if you ask former inmate Norman Carlson, he'll tell you there's no denying it. There are ghosts at Alcatraz, he says, and I've talked to several of them. No. 1. The Curse of the Bambino. It's one of the most infamous curses in sports history. But how did it start? Well, let's go back to 1918. That's when the Boston Red Sox sold their star player, Babe Ruth. See, we're dead now, but we left clues about ourselves all over this place we called home, or at least some of us did. Most of what we left behind has been lost, looted or paved over, and there is always something sad about finding an old shoebox full of ancient artifacts at an estate sale. But here's the thing, even if our stuff was mostly trash, the longer you spend in the shadows of these vanished worlds, the more you realize something. The dead are still talking. They speak through glyphs etched into temple walls, buried treasure maps of trade routes, and whispering skeletons. And not literally whispering, unless you've been in the desert too long. Take the Nazca lines in Peru, for example. Who doesn't love the Nazca lines? You can see them from space, so they must be important, right? Some kind of alien welcome sign, maybe landing coordinates for the mothership. But maybe they were just the world's first giant doodles. Just some guy looking for an epic view from his drone and putting down coordinates so his buds could find the party. But come on, when you zoom out, the scale is just so mind-boggling that it's impossible not to think bigger, like these geometric shapes. They cover hundreds of acres. Some depict animals like monkeys, hummingbirds, and spiders. Others show plants and imaginary creatures. Some look like parts of a machine. All are made by carving away the desert's reddish-brown surface to expose the white soil underneath. It took generations of people working with simple tools to make these figures, which means that the person or people who came up with this idea had to convince many other people to help them make it happen. And the scale of the project meant that those people would never get to see the finished product, much less appreciate how awesome they'd helped make it. To answer that question, we have to ask another one. What do you believe in? Do you pray every day for good grades on your big test tomorrow? Or maybe beg the gods for rain after a drought? Do you turn to your beliefs for comfort after losing someone close to you? Religion isn't easy to understand, especially if you're studying it from the outside. It can feel weird and foreign and downright creepy, but it's also personal. comforting, and super powerful. From a certain point of view, religion is basically the opposite of science. Science requires proof, evidence, and repeatability. But most religious experiences aren't any of those things. Think of religion as a set of answers written in a language that science can't read, and those answers are often about questions that science can't even ask, like what happens after we die. In fact, before science started explaining the natural world, religion was humanity's best attempt at understanding it. Okay, let's talk about those Nazca lines again. A lot of people believe that they were made for religious reasons. That might sound strange, since nobody knows exactly what the Nazca people believed in. And a lot of their holy sites are right on top of mountains or deep in caves. Not exactly prime drone view real estate, but archaeologists found a lot of Nazca pottery buried under the Pan American Highway. These pieces usually depict two-legged creatures with big heads and skinny bodies. Some have bird beaks and wings, while others wear Nazca hats, which are a type of headdress that look like a tall crown made of feathers. These figures are called the warrior priests, though no one knows for sure what they represent. Perhaps they were gods, or maybe they were messengers between the gods and the Nazca people. Archaeologists also found a lot of animal bones at Nazca ceremonial sites, which means the Nazca people probably kept sacred animals. The Nazca were especially fond of llamas, but they also kept dogs, turtles, and birds, among other animals. They even bred giant flightless cormorants on the coast, probably just to sacrifice them later. But why bother sacrificing birds when you can draw them instead? Well, here's the thing about drawings, carvings, and statues. Unlike a live animal, they can't fly away, hide in a cave, or bite you, so they were safer to make than actual gods. And if they got damaged, you could always fix them. I mean, that's the advantage of being immortal, right? You have plenty of time to finish your art project. So let's say that you were a Nazca artist looking for a great view. Where would you go? How about the highest peak in the area? Cerro de la Virgen. This hill is 937 meters above sea level and 426 meters high. It looks like a sphinx from far away. Also, according to legend, it was where the Nazca people emerged from the underworld. Okay, time for another question. What's the deal with hills anyway? Yes, they're often excellent locations for building permanent settlements. If you want to be close to a water source without actually living in it, hills provide a nice elevated vantage point and extra protection from floods. Plus, if a neighboring tribe comes to pay you a friendly visit, you can spot them coming from miles away and hide all your valuables. But aside from settling in the best spots, people also build stuff on hills. Look at the citadel of Kulap in northern Peru. Archaeologists think it was a religious center, although it kinda looks like a fort. Maybe it was both. It's a stone fortress with 650 steps, 40 towers, and 8 plazas. It sits on top of a hill 3,000 meters above sea level. No wonder the Nazca people called it the Gokta of Clouds. In fact, the citadel's remote location probably helped keep it hidden from looters until relatively recently. It wasn't rediscovered until 1846, even though it was built sometime before 350 AD. For comparison, Machu Picchu was built around 1450 AD, so it was familiar enough to locals that they didn't even try to hide it. But back then, there was no way to get there. The closest road was built during the Spanish colonial period, and it took 40 days to complete. So the people who lived in Kulap must have been pretty committed to their beliefs. They lived in the middle of nowhere. In fact, it's so far off the beaten path that scientists have never even figured out how people got there. There's a short trail, but it's really steep and full of loose rocks. The longest route involves crossing rugged terrain over 22 kilometers. But neither of those routes were around during pre-contact times. Plus, people would have had to cross a river to get there. And while it was probably shallow enough to wade across in pre-contact times, nowadays it's pretty damn dangerous. Today, the only way to reach the citadel of Kulap is via cable car. If the Nazca people needed a big hill to make their art, where did they put their treasures? Well, follow the path worn smooth by thousands of feet, through 4,000 years of pilgrimage, and you'll end up at another mountain, at 6,640 meters above sea level. It's the highest peak in the Peruvian Andes and one of the highest in the world. Many cultures considered Huascaran sacred, including the Inca, the Chima, and the Nazca. Legend says that the Nazca people settled on its slopes after leaving the citadel of Kulap, and they left behind 3 treasures: the mask of the Lord of Saipan, the Lord of Saipan's scepter, and the Lord of Saipan's coffin. The mask of the Lord of Saipan was made around 300 BC. It's decorated with turquoise, stones, shell and gold ornaments, and precious metals. That means it's either very valuable or very heavy, or both. It's also weird. Unlike most Nazca art, it depicts a human face, specifically the face of a man wearing a distinctive feathered headdress. He also has a mustache, earrings and a pendant around his neck. But who's the man behind the mask? Nobody knows. He could have been a god, a local chieftain, or a hybrid of the two. As for his scepter, it's decorated with monkeys, felines, snakes, owls and lizards. But it's not just decoration. These figures have special meanings that experts are still trying to figure out. As for the coffin, it's covered with silver and gold and decorated with mythical monsters, but nobody knows exactly what kind of monsters they are, what they symbolize, or what they have to do with whatever religion the Nazca people followed. In fact, nobody even knows what this mysterious third treasure chest was doing inside the coffin. That's 3 big piles of unknown treasures. Now ask yourself, what do you think? Were the Nazca people obsessed with mountains? Did they hold ceremonies on top of hills? And was the summit of Huascaron the holiest site of all? Because if it was, that would explain why so many of their legendary treasures turned up there. Here I yell about something else, and I am excited because I get to share my favorite thing in the entire world with you. There are hundreds of sites around the globe covered in giant stone heads, staring blankly ahead, either whispering secrets to the wind or keeping a watchful eye on the living. They seem to have appeared out of nowhere, defying easy explanation. Each head has its own unique features and backstory, but together they raise one universal question: who were these people and what happened to them? Our journey begins here at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, also known as the Pyramid of Kukulkan, located in Chichen Itza, Mexico. The site was first occupied around 450 BC by the Maya and served as a ceremonial center for centuries. When Cortés arrived in 1529 AD, he found the city abandoned, which according to history books was because the Maya suddenly got bored. Actually, the city was likely destroyed during a battle between 2 rival Maya kingdoms. However, the mysterious Toltec people soon arrived and claimed the pyramid as their own. Toltec culture flourished between 900 and 1300 AD. He was a warrior king who led his armies to great victories across Mesoamerica. He was revered as a god of war and considered divine. And when he died, he was mummified, placed in a golden coffin and buried beneath the pyramid. Archaeologists discovered his tomb in 1938, and it was filled with priceless artifacts, including jade jewelry, a crown made of pure gold and over 50 human sacrifices. The discovery was huge news, but, unfortunately, almost all of the artifacts were stolen or destroyed shortly after. That is except for the sarcophagus itself, which still remains hidden beneath the temple, undisturbed since 1938. Some say the treasure still lies there waiting to be found. Others claim that the treasures were never there in the first place, that the tomb is empty. Is the rumor true? Did the warrior king rule from a hollowed-out pyramid with no tomb at all? Or was his final resting place robbed long ago? Our next stop takes us 5,000 miles away to Cambodia, home to the lost city of Mahana, also known as the Khmer Empire, which lasted from the 9th to the 15th century. At its peak, the empire stretched from southern Thailand to near Hanoi in Vietnam during the 12th century. Jayavarman VII was crowned king and began work on the grandest temple of them all, Angkor Wat. It took 60 years to build and at the time was the largest religious monument ever constructed. Built from sandstone, it depicts scenes from Hindu mythology, including churning of the Sea of Milk, the churning of the Sea of Milk, where the gods and demons churned the ocean to find an elixir of immortality. In the center of the temple sits a giant lotus flower. Built into the petals are 54 cells containing the remains of Buddhist monks. The lotus symbolizes enlightenment, and each monk is said to represent a different god. To reach the center and explore the cells, visitors must walk barefoot through a dark tunnel. It's a symbolic representation of rebirth. Visitors leave the old life behind and re-enter a purified world. According to legend, each monk volunteered to be entombed alive. They locked themselves in the cells before the final construction stones were set in place and waited for enlightenment. Other sources claim the monks were entombed against their will. Perhaps the most sinister theory is that the monks willingly sacrificed themselves to honor Jayavarman VII, who was rumored to be a vampire. One myth tells of a young boy who sneaked into the palace kitchen and accidentally cut off the king's finger. The king demanded retribution, and the boy offered his own finger as a sacrifice. The king accepted and dipped his bread in the boy's blood. This may have been a ritualistic practice common among ancient rulers who believed they could achieve immortality by drinking the blood of innocents. Next, We travel 5,700 miles to the jungles of Laos, where the remnants of the kingdom of Lanshang can still be seen, but its first verifiable ruler wasn't crowned until 1353 AD under his reign. The kingdom reached its greatest territorial extent by the late 15th century. However, neighboring empires had begun to crumble. The once proud kingdom became increasingly isolated and eventually fell into ruin. Today, only a few crumbling temples remain. The Plain of Jars National Monument covers 3 separate sites scattered throughout the northeastern part of the country. The plain derives its name from the large number of unexplained megalithic pottery jars scattered around the area. There are over 2,500 jars ranging in size, from those small enough to hold human remains to others large enough to fit 30 people inside. Some contain bones, while others appear to have never been used. Some have lids, while others look like they were smashed and overturned. Still, others speculate they were used in warfare, perhaps as projectiles shot from catapults. Although no written records exist explaining their purpose, some scholars have noted striking similarities between the jars and other funeral urns found throughout Southeast Asia. The most popular theory is that the jars were created to hold cremated remains, a custom still practiced in parts of Laos today. From there we travel 5,500 miles south to the island nation of Madagascar. The island's original inhabitants were the Makadisho, a peaceful tribe of farmers. However, Arab traders would soon arrive, offering the natives shiny new tools made of metal. The Madayashu were fascinated and welcomed the Arabs as friends. They learned to make their own iron tools and weapons, then turned on their former allies and enslaved them. The Madayashu then went on to conquer the rest of the island, enslaving or killing everyone in their path. By 1500, they ruled supreme over a vast empire. The secrets of their metallurgical knowledge were lost when the Portuguese invaded and burned their cities to the ground. Scholars don't know exactly what caused the collapse. Some blame the Portuguese, others believe internal conflict played a role. Either way, their great cities were abandoned and their advanced knowledge was forgotten. All that remains today are a few dozen standing stone pillars and burial sites containing strange artifacts, such as swords and spearheads. Their advanced technology continues to fascinate modern scientists and historians. Now let's travel 10,500 miles across the water to Easter Island. Sometime between 1200 and 1500 AD, the indigenous islanders built a society unlike any other. Over the course of several centuries, they carved nearly 900 enormous statues called moai. Each statue weighs an average of 12 tons and stands 33 feet tall. They were crafted from a single piece of basalt rock, using only primitive tools such as stone, hammers, and chisels. The moai have strange elongated heads and deep-set eyes, which has led some to believe that they were designed to represent ancestors. Others argue they were meant to be ceremonial seats. Most scholars agree that the moai were created to commemorate important tribal figures and set up outside ceremonial complexes, but we don't know much more than that. The moai were abandoned sometime before 1684 when the first European ship arrived on the island. By that time, the island's population had dwindled to just a few thousand. They lived in small villages, grew crops, and fished for food. Their society was unrecognizable from its former self. So how did such an advanced society collapse? Some blame warfare, others point to ecological disaster. When European settlers arrived, they found the island stripped bare of trees. Perhaps the settlers chopped down the last tree to make room for cattle grazing. Whatever the reason, the island's native inhabitants would die out within the next few decades. Finally, we travel 5,000 miles across the water to the ancient Greek island of Delos. Once upon a time, the island was home to the Temple of Apollo, one of the largest and grandest structures in the ancient world. Its columns were made of precious metals and gems. Inside sat a massive oracular tripod where the god Apollo delivered prophecies. Every year, thousands of pilgrims came to hear what the gods had to say about their future. But how did the prophecy work? Well, according to legend, the island was originally underwater. However, the gods granted it to Apollo after he defeated the Titans. Grateful for his service, Zeus struck a nearby mountain with lightning, causing it to split open. From the crack came a spring of water and mist. The mist carried messages from the gods, and whoever interpreted the message correctly received their prophecy. Now, oracles weren't uncommon in the ancient world. In fact, the Romans had their own version in the form of Sibylline books, a collection of prophecies supposedly delivered to the city of Rome by a Persian woman named Sibyl. However, the Sibyls didn't speak through a priestess as the Delphic oracle did. Instead, their words were written down. What sets the Delphic oracle apart is the physical link to the god Apollo. He spoke directly through the priestess. His presence gave the prophecies far more power than other forms of divination. Sadly, the island's fortunes would eventually change. In 226 BC, Athens declared war on Delos, destroying the temple and slaying or enslaving the islanders. Later, it was occupied by Caesar Augustus, Cleopatra, and Mark Antony. Eventually, the island was abandoned and sank into obscurity. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want more, check out my channel. I ramble about history, archaeology, and classic art.